Hey everybody, Matt Gear here for the Geek Pride cast on this Sunday evening, a different day. We thought we'd throw in something different, and Matt totally didn't forget about it at all and had to panic within 5 minutes of Pete going, we're Eddie waiting. I'm like, oh no. Anyway, so welcome everybody. With me tonight, we have my co-host, Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening, everyone. And I'm just saying, we have been agreeing Sunday. In fact, I reminded you yesterday. Don't forget.
You did as well. But yeah, I'm claiming ADHD on that. And our special guest, Eddy Webb.
Hello.
Eddie, so for those who don't know, who are you? What do you do? What's your thing?
My name is Eddy Webb. My pronouns are he, him. And I have been working in the tabletop and video game industries since 2001. Primarily as a freelancer. In 2014, I went full-time freelance, so now this is my job entirely. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I've worked on a lot of licensed stuff.
When you say you've been working in TTRPGs for over 20 years, your list, that is saying that is one thing. Your list of games is colossal. There are games on there that. And I'm an ardent role player. The games I've not even heard of, like the Red Dwarf roleplay game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how did all this come about?
Well, a combination of interest and accident, which I think is probably most creative careers. Like when I grew up playing role-playing games, particularly in the 80s, it was something I definitely wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in games. Like I remember very clearly for Mother's Day one year when I was like 7 or 8, I actually made a board game for my mom as a present. So I was very early on. I wanted to do that. And so I was like, just lots of making hack games for my friends, messing with games like Marvel Superheroes and D&D and Cyberpunk 2020 for a lot of times and trying to write new rules for everything. And then around 2001, I actually got onto an email list talking about wrestling. And I ended up talking to a woman named Cynthia Celeste Miller, who turned out she was also working in tabletop role-playing games. And we started talking. We got really excited. We bonded over a mutual love of 80s cartoons. And then we found out that she was actually working on a role-playing game called Cartoon Action Hour, which emulated 80s cartoons. And that's kind of where it started. Is she brought me on board. I worked with her a little bit on that. We were very happy with that. But then from there, I got in touch with other people who reached out to me for work, or I reached out to them for work, and it just kind of built and snowballed from there. So it was a lot of being just on the line of being annoying with people, but also just trying to do the best I could with what I had, and eventually that started panning out. But it was I often joke that I am a overnight success 20 years in the making. It certainly feels like that.
And
yeah,
you did. So we had a really good chat when we were at UK Games Expo over.
We did, yeah.
It was, you had a hand in a Transformers RPG. Was
Yes.
it? Yes.
I
remember that very specifically because I was like, oh my god, I've never heard of this.
That was honestly my whale for a long time, because I had a hobby of collecting Transformers fan role-playing games and never quite finding one that I liked. And then I had written 2 for my own purposes. And again, like I ran a fairly long Transformers game, like 2001, 2002. It was like right early in my career. And I was like, why has there never been an official one, like, ever? And then I was very vocal about this online. And then luckily it's a very small industry. So it became down to a friend of mine heard from his friends about this through, back channels. and was like, "You really need to get this guy on the project." And so he hooked me up. I wrote out to them, and I was like, hey, here's what I'm interested in. Here's my knowledge. And they're like, would you be okay with writing source material for it? And I was just like, oh my God, yes. I got to the point where I was like, okay, I have some specific questions. And after a certain point in time, they're like, okay, we don't know what you're asking anymore, so it's probably fine. It's like, cool, yes.
And I mean, there's a lot of lore behind Transformers when you start digging into it.
Oh yeah, because that's one. I mean, I've worked on a lot of licensed products leading up to this, and so I actually had a lot of questions asked for any kind of licensed product. But in this one in particular, it was a lot of things like, which continuity are we going to be in? I assume you want something that's reasonably close to kind of the default 80 structure, but are we actually using the original continuity? Is this a new one? And then we started going through that, and I was okay, how much can I, because they wanted to do a whole new continuity effectively. It's something that felt like the 80s continuity, but had a lot of the new updates and featured some of the new characters they'd introduced and whatnot. And so then I was like, okay, cool. How much can I borrow from other continuities or anything that's off the table? I mean, I joked about it a little bit because I was asking questions like, what about Japanese exclusive characters? Like, we don't know what you're talking about. But even then, a lot of the team was still very knowledgeable. They're like, okay, let's talk about Beast Wars. How much of that do you want to incorporate here? It's like, what about Gestalts? Where do we draw the line on that? Because there's a lot of gimmick characters. How deep into this do we want to get? But they were saying things like, no, we definitely want to do someone who can play a character like Soundwave, who has lots of minions. So how do we make sure that's a piece of it? And we want to make sure we can do Grimlock. So robot dinosaurs are on the table. So I mean, the team was all really excited and passionate about it, which was great. But then it was being made simultaneously with G.I. Joe and Power Rangers. And so I was also kind of helping them because we all worked together to build the system. And those systems the same across all three games. So it was a lot of meetings where it's okay, this needs to work this way for Power Rangers and this way for G.I. Joe. And luckily, I happened to know a little bit about all three of them. So we ended up some really good conversations on that front too. So I also got to work a little kind of at a remove on those two games as well. I don't list them because it feels weird and actually directly write on them, but they would throw things out like, we need to do how do we do putties in this game? And say, I understand that reference. Let me talk through that. Or, here's how we do equipment in G.I. Joe versus something in Transformers. So yeah, it was a really cool project. I'm glad I got to be a part of it.
Did licensing ever come into it? Because you got so many different, almost licenses to deal with in terms of Transformers. Was that an issue?
Well, luckily I didn't have to directly engage with that. I had someone at Renegade who kind of navigated that for me, but I did ask a lot of questions. And then amusingly, I became kind of the default canon guy because we had a production assistant who just had a whole bunch of questions. And they were like, okay, what about this? What about this? And finally, just ask Eddy. And I was like, okay, cool, great. So we had a long conversation. But what I got from the conversations was that basically Hasbro has a concept they've had for a few years now, what they call, quote, Evergreen. And Evergreen are kind of vaguely original generation Transformers. So Optimus Prime is a big red truck. Jazz is a car. Ratchet's an ambulance, what have you. But they're all updated to modern day sensibilities. When there became a question, we ultimately had to land on the side of the then current continuity, which was Cyberverse, which was itself an Evergreen inspired franchise. But we also drew from the IDW comics, which at the time were still ongoing, which I was a huge fan of. In fact, a lot of the art came from the IDW comics pages. And so I think kind of what happened is that Hasbro over time has managed to bring a lot of the pieces in-house as they can. And I really think, like, for example, I made a joke about the Japanese exclusive characters. I think those are primarily just because those are kind of still owned by the Japanese toy companies. But even then, like, if they're like, if we really need it, let us know. We can work with it. I was like, I don't. I'm just being a nerd. Ignore me. I can work just fine with this.
Yeah. And then the films came out by Michael Bay.
Yeah, and like we never actually talked about the films, which is usually the best way to handle them. But that's one thing I did talk about. Is like going, how do we need to reference anything about the live action movies? And they're like, no, we're keeping it pretty firmly to the animated continuities. And I'm like, okay, cool, great. That is the beginning, middle, and end of this conversation. I don't have to have robots that hang like testicles off of a giant robot. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of stopped watching. Oh, I watched the first one, and I did enjoy the first 10 minutes, like Scorponok's attack. I thought that was nicely done.
Yep.
But then it just no.
I can work up a half-hearted defense of the first film. I watched the second films, and I'm like, oh, this is not only racist, but it's actually offensive on several different levels. So I opted out the second movie. Came back for Bumblebee, which I actually quite liked.
Yeah, Bumblebee wasn't too bad.
And Bumblebee was pretty good. And then I heard initially, like, Rise of the Beasts was a different team, and most of the team that worked on Bumblebee worked on Rise of the Beasts. Like, oh, I'll go watch it. And like a whole bunch of people contacted me, like, do not watch Rise of the Beasts. So I'm like, oh. So I got this one. So I watched 2.5 of the live action films.
Yeah, it really is not good. It's really, I mean, but like it should be like almost an instant moneymaker, like giant robots on screen punching each other, but they just managed to make it absolutely offensive on every level.
Yeah. I mean, I think it ultimately comes down to be blunt, no one quite knows how Transformers works.
Yeah.
Everyone has gotten it kind of right and kind of wrong. And it's just different levels of what's right and what's wrong, frankly. But it's kind of a hard property to wrap your head around, because there are certainly some people who are like, you just want giant space robots punching each other, and it's all you need, and there's no human elements. But you do need some kind of, not a viewpoint character, but at least a connection to Earth culture to kind of find your way into that narrative. So it can't just be giant space robots punching each other. But the more you try to put it into our Earth, there's a certain point where it just becomes an implausible concept. You know, the concepts have to break down after a point. So you're always kind of weaving back and forth between those two poles. And sometimes they get it really, really right. Sometimes they get it really wrong. And even the IDW comics, which were great, ultimately they got good by just saying, okay, we're going to start telling stories after the Decepticon Autobot war. And that's just not you can't start from that. You have to build up to that and then have the conversation after that. That's something you kind of just dive in. It would be like, I'm going to start a G.I. Joe comic where Cobra's already defeated. You know, it's like, you can't, it's kind of a non-starter. You have to work your way through that to get there. But that's a very rare case of them doing something really interesting with the property, but they had to work to get there. So a lot of times with Transformers, it's just like, I don't know, let's make them animals. Let's see what happens there. And also, like, there's I don't personally watch it, but I just blanked on the name. There's a kid-friendly one that's been going for like 6 years now. Rescue Bots.
Yes.
And it's very much aimed for very young kids. It's a very different take on Transformers, and it does fantastically well. So it's just like, why does that work? I don't know. Is it because Peter Cullen did Optimus Prime for a few episodes? Maybe that's the reason. I don't know.
Yeah. I love to ask as well. Sorry.
I was going to say, I love the Peter Cullen story about how he came to get the Optimus Prime voice. And he was it's based off his brother, who was a Marine. Mm-hmm. It was based off his brother, who's a Marine. And like, I'll not even quote it because I'll just destroy it. But you can find on TikTok or on YouTube and stuff like that. But it's basically Peter Cullen explaining how he got the voice and how, you know, he was influenced by his brother's sort of kind of soft but slightly firm but fair sort of voice and stuff stuff, and it's just like, yeah, that was so good. Love it.
Similar, David Kay also has a great story about how he got his Megatron voice for Beast Wars, because he was just trying to do kind of growly and scary voice, and then he was just screwing around. One of the lines happened to have the word yes in it, and he's kind of hit on that syllable, that yes, and the voice director was like, wait, do that again, and they just found reasons to get him to kind of hit. I mean, that became his catchphrase for a while, but also just from there, it's you have to be as evil as possible, but also slightly absurd. And it really came down to him just goofing around and then accidentally finding the voice when he thought, this is going to be the real voice. And it's like, no, actually, that's the one we want. So it was similar. It's like sometimes you just kind of stumble into these things.
Yeah, I mean, like a full-time freelance game developer.
Mm-hmm.
What point did you realize, like, this isn't just like a part-time job, this is my full-time job? What was that kind of tipping point for you?
I really wish I could say that there was some kind of well thought out escalation where I finally was able to make a decision to commit full-time. But what really happened was I got fired from my job.
Okay. Wow.
Because I worked from 2007 to 2014 at White Wolf, which merged with CCP.
Yeah.
And then, so for a couple of years, I was working full-time at White Wolf with role-playing games. And then there was a strong push that everyone needs to be working on the World Darkness MMO they were making. So eventually I moved over to there, which wasn't a big deal. I eventually didn't want to work in video games anyway. So it's like, okay, well, that's actually where I want to go. So that's not bad. So I worked on the World Darkness MMO for a number of years. And then 2014, they're like, nope, we're done. Everyone go home. We're shutting the whole studio down. So I had the lovely experience of coming into the office on Monday with my wife on our wedding anniversary to get fired.
No.
And the best part is that like most of our bosses just had run out of patience, and so they told us all on Friday, even though we weren't supposed to know. So we came in, we thought it was hilarious because like they're trying to tiptoe around this, and we're like, we know what's happening. But so after that, I got a few kind of short-term contracts lined up, and I was like, okay, but I'll use these while I'm start looking for other video game work. And I lived in Atlanta at the time. I couldn't find anything in Atlanta. We bought a house, and so I said, well, I'll try, Canada. I'll try California. I'll try New York. I'll try Austin. All areas that have potential work for them, and just nothing was really hitting. It was a combination of I wasn't right for the company, or they didn't click with me. And so after a few months of that, I was just like, I had been picking up contracts from all the different contacts I make. So I just need to make money until I figure this out. And I sat back and I realized, oh, actually, I'm pretty much doing a full-time job now. So can I keep this rolling? And so I said, well, I'll try it for 6 months. And my family was very supportive of it. And I said, okay, we'll try for 6 months, see how it goes. And then 6 months came and went. And it's like, actually, I'm still got a pretty steady collection of assignments here. So I was able to do it, but I'm not full-time tabletop RPG freelancer. I take it back. At this exact moment, that is a lot of my work. But that I had to build up to that over many years.
Yeah.
So for most of the time, it's like I'm doing lots of consulting work. I do video game work. I just recently did a mentorship program for a college here in the UK, where actually I mentored a writer because they wanted to write in the video game sphere, and so actually they got paid to mentor them for a while. I've been to as a speaker at conventions and at colleges and whatnot. So it's like, well, whatever I can get. I mean, I've written for film critic essays. So I mean, it's whatever I think I can work on and I can do. So that's kind of the bigger umbrella of freelance. But I mean, I do keep coming back to the role-playing games, and obviously Onyx Path right now is kind of my major client. I do a lot of work with them, so I end up doing primarily that. But still, every once in a while, I'll pick up a project from somewhere else, like, oh, this is interesting, or I'll learn something from it, or it's good money. Just recently, it just got released, but Roll20 came to me and they're like, hey, your name was put forward to work on a supplement for the Marvel Multiverse game. We're doing a Roll20 specific Marvel venture. And you thought somebody might be interested in writing it. And I was like, yes, please. Oh God, yes. Okay. And they were like, we're thinking about doing something with Super Scroll. I don't know if you know anything about that. And me, personally reading Fantastic Four since John Byrne was writing it in the 80s, I'm like, I may know a bit about Super Scroll. But something I do occasionally, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do this because I want to work on this property, or I'll do this because I want to work with these people. It's honestly, it came down, it started because I just needed to get a job. And I realized that at that point in time, I had 12 years experience and 12 years of networking behind me that I could try to piece something together. So like if I had tried in 2001 or 2002 when I started to do this as full-time freelance, no way, there's absolutely no way I could have done it. It was only from doing it from job to job to job that I slowly built up enough that, okay, there's a shift, but it really, in some ways, being fired was the best thing to happen to me because it pushed me to go that route. And I've now been self-employed for almost 9 years now.
That mirrors a lot of my own experiences. I mean, I'm a full-time freelancer, primarily journalism, cover a lot of cybersecurity and gaming. And it was the company turning to me admitting that, oh, we've cocked up your hours and your holiday allowance. You've been taking too many holidays and you owe us 30 days holiday. Can you please make them up to us, please?
Ooh.
And I went, no, that was your cook up because you agreed to it.
Yeah.
And I was like this, look, and here's the emails that I kind of sent off to HR, checking everything, make sure they're all correct. And they're going, okay. And they said, well, we're still going to drop your holidays down. I said, okay then, bye. And I've been in that time for about 7 years. 7 years? Yeah, 7 years. I kind of been working in my spare time, like writing, doing like side gigs, hustling.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that point, thinking, let's give it a go. And like I say, 6 months, saying, okay, this is making things a lot easier. So 10 years later, I'm like, why didn't they do this to me earlier?
Right. And it's funny. It's like, I mean, obviously, being a freelancer, it's a very tumultuous career choice. There's a lot of things you have to take care of. There's a lot of frustrations with it. But I mean, on the flip side, I love the fact that I can fire clients. And there's been a couple, not many. I've had really good luck with clients. But there's a couple clients where it's just like, you know what, I'm done. I'm out. Yeah. And I just find a exit clause and cool. I'm going to give you, here's 1 month of work or whatever. But otherwise, I'm out of here. I can do that. Or people can come to me with work and I just go, no, I'm not feeling that. There was one person, I won't name any names, but one person approached me and I looked them up on Twitter and a couple of social media places, and their politics were hilariously opposite of mine. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I think trans people should have rights, so I think we're just not going to fit together.
Yeah, I find like when you freelance, you can choose your clients, and that like a few times when I've approached someone, or they approached me, and I was going, no. Or like if start dictating terms and conditions, like, oh, you write first verse and we'll decide if we want to buy it. Like, no, that's not how it works. No. Oh, so that's not how all our other journalists do it. No, it's not.
That's so...
And I just... Sorry, Matt?
No, you carry on, Pete. Sorry, I interrupted.
So, no, I was just like, no, that's not how it's done. And we just basically went, no, I'm not going to work for you. And also means I can adapt my workload to suit what's happening in the family. Like, it's just coming out to school holidays. So when I'm just kind of lower my workload a bit to look after the kids. Now that it's starting back to school, I could start ramping up again. So it balances out brilliantly for me and just solves a lot of problems.
It's a
and honestly, I mean, it was a big factor in me moving too. It's like, I can just take my clients, even though I moved from the UK. I can still work with a lot of American clients right now. I'm still building up my European client base. But I mean, you're right. I have the flexibility to work from anywhere as long as the client's okay with it. Yeah, it's great.
That sort of segues into two things actually. So one about your move to the UK, but another one, the political. Obviously basing your clientele on political views. It's always baffled me how people, like, for example, I'm into Warhammer and things like that, and when the Black Lives Matter thing was going a few years back, they put a statement out and loads of people kicked off and says, oh, you should keep politics out of gaming and stuff like that. It's like, you shouldn't. It's like, why? And they're saying it's wait a minute, basic human rights surely should be integral in sort of like in company policy. Like I work for solicitors, and they've got a lot of sort of like these things ingrained in their in the company, which I'm really I think's great. But it's like it boggles my brain how people think that this sort of thing shouldn't be involved and companies shouldn't have any views on them, and it's like they should have views on them, and at least where you stand then. Because if I knew a company was racist, homophobic, or any of those isms and ibics, I wouldn't want to do business with them. And if they had a neutral stance on it, then again, you might as well just support it then. And again, I wouldn't want to. I probably wouldn't want to be a part of it. And it's so when people came out and started, going, this is where we stand. So we did the same thing. This is our stance. People kicked off, and we had loads of people. Why are you saying this? And so, because this is right, and this is what we believe.
This is the right thing to do.
Yeah, this is the right thing to do. And yeah, it boggles my brain that people think that politics doesn't sort of come into companies and how you deal with other people. It's just weird.
Well, and like, I mean, so I consider myself, amongst many things, a feminist, and I'm constantly thinking of the feminist ideology of the political is personal, right? Ultimately, politics stems from personal relationships. And I think that's ultimately true, but doubly so for a creative industry, right? Like, if again, I've had really, really good luck with clients. And there's been a couple projects where it's like, okay, this is a short-term thing. They don't have offensive politics, but it's like, I'm just going to do this job and put the words in and move on. But I mean, if I have to go into a company and they say, we want to do a horror game, and their politics are very different from mine, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have an uphill battle to talk about things like, okay, this is a racist stereotype, and this is why we don't want the game, or this is an ableist stereotype, and that's why we don't want to present that. It's just not going to be a good fit. And so being able to say, okay, listen, this is not, I'm just going to proactively kind of not go that route. But also, I mean, on some level, like, I'm a tattooed punk, right? Like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I mean, I was one of those kids who like skateboard or die. You listen to Anthrax.
Yes. Yes.
I listened to a weird amount of punk, like in the sense of like, the Ramones and Sex Pistols, sure, yeah, but also like the Dead Milkmen, like, there's weird kind of that comedy punk movement of like the late 80s, early 90s. So like, I know I have a very strong opinion on these things, and I can choke it back if it's not the time to talk about it, right? Like, for example, being with hearing loss, the fact I have giant hearing aids left in my head, I can't really, distance myself from that. I don't want to, but also not every game's going to need to directly address disability. But sometimes I do find I have to talk about it in things that people aren't thinking about. Like, I did a pirate game, and I'm like, cool, we need to talk about disability, because the iconic image of a pirate is someone who doesn't have all of their limbs. And when you phrase it like that, people go, oh, yeah. It's like, yeah, like they're missing an eye, they're missing a hand, they're missing a leg. Those are all disabilities. We need to talk about that. But I also recognize that, if it's not a game that's directly engaging with that, like, say, a high fantasy game, it's like, okay, as long as we're not doing anything that encourages or reinforces the negative stereotype, we don't need to do like a whole sidebar about disability specifically, because this game's not going to really touch on it. Let's just kind of avoid the pit holes, but don't necessarily dig deep into them. But if you're doing a game like just off the top of my head, I didn't work on it, but Harlem Unbound, right, which is about the Black experience in the 20s and the Cthulhu mythos, and people going, "Why is this game so political?" And it's like, how could you not be? I mean, the whole point is you're directly addressing the racism of the creator with the products.
Lovecraft.
Right. So it's like, it's not a. I've grown increasingly intolerant of people who are talking about injecting politics, particularly in established franchises. I love when people go mad about how Doctor Who is injecting politics into it lately. And I'm just like, have you watched the same show over the past 60 years that I have? Because boy, howdy, it's not like Tom Baker wasn't exactly overthrowing governments every other episode. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, even back watching Sylvester McCoy in the 80s.
Oh, God, yeah.
I thought, yeah, that's political.
Yeah.
And they said at the time, it was always political. They left a sign in the windows saying "No blacks, no diggers."
Yeah.
And the windows, because no, we have to put, and Silver's going to, we have to put that in.
Right. So I'm totally with y'all. It's like going, I don't, there's a lot of my politics that I don't talk about because frankly, a lot of it's not anyone's business, right? In the sense of there's lots of subtle nuanced things I'm happy to discuss with people if they want to talk about, specific topics or whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's like I don't necessarily constantly broadcast them on social media or whatnot because they're mine, and I don't feel a need to score points and say, look at how liberal I am, or whatever. I don't. That's not how I'm wired. But I won't tolerate bullying in the community. And also, I if you think, hey, Nazis are shitheads and maybe need to be dealt with once in a while, it's a controversial statement, I don't want you as my customer. And that's just a good way to kind of sever that relationship right off the bat.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's it sort of reminds me of there's the bit in Clerks where they're talking about the Death Star and the rebels blowing up the Death Star and how they were all sort of innocent contractors, and then the guy comes in and he says, I had a friend who worked, I can't remember their exact quote, but he goes in, he worked for some mafiosos, and if you're a contractor, you gotta know you gotta know who you're dealing with and stuff. So they weren't really innocent because they knew, the inference being that they obviously knew who they were working for and therefore probably weren't too innocent because they knew they were working for the Empire and stuff. And that sort of just went through my head when we were talking about it.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Anyway, so UK, so how long have you been here? When did you move over? And why did you move?
A couple of reasons. So I moved over in February, I landed January 31st, but February 1st kind of just slightly easier to track. So I've been here March, April, May, June, July, August, almost 7 months now. And I did it for a couple reasons. One of which is I'm a British citizen, actually. My mom was born in England, so I just applied for citizenship. That's a kind of a funny story. So my grandfather was in the U.S. Air Force, and he was stationed in Britain right before the Korean War kicked off. And he was in medical. But this was the late 40s. Late 40s, early 50s. And they were starting to decommission the U.S. Air Force bases here. So the hospital that was on the Air Force Base was originally loaned to the U.S. by England, and they said, "Hey, we'd like our land back now because the war's over." And they said, "Cool, great. Here's the hospital back." And they hadn't set up a new hospital for that base. So when my mom was born, she was born on land that had officially been given back to England. So therefore, she's born on British soil. And so when we looked into this for years, I was like, I don't think I can get it. It seems like it's a weird edge case. So finally, I was like, let me just talk to an immigration lawyer. And it was a funny experience because I was like, okay, here's my situation. And I showed the paperwork, and they're like, I don't know. Let me talk to my colleague. And this for like 20 minutes off the Zoom call, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Right? It's like, all right, they're gonna say no. It's weird. But then I was like, no, actually, one of my colleagues, been in here for 30 years, knows the case you're talking about, like that example, because apparently it's happened a few times recently, was aware of that and said, "Yep, no, you're good to go." And so I just went through the process.
So wait a minute. So because it was an American Air Force base, therefore it's counted as American territory, and because so even if she'd been born in England but in an American Air Force base, she would still be.
It would still be American soil.
Yes. Right. Okay. Right. Interesting. Right.
But because legally it had changed back over. Yeah, because originally that's what they're going to say no, because they're going, if she's born in an Air Force base, and that, you know, or the same as born in an embassy, you're officially born in that country.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, here's the edge case, and like, oh, actually, yeah, no, that's fine. That's a British hospital, so you're good. You know, she had a British birth certificate. So when we looked into that, and that was partially because my family had wanted to move overseas for several years. I'll just say that something happened in November of 2016 that really accelerated our plans on that front. And so we spent, again, we tried to move to Ireland for a few months in 2017. Didn't work for a variety of reasons, almost entirely due to us. I was the first international move. We made some mistakes. We didn't plan well, and we just couldn't afford it. We had to move back. And so we spent the next 5 years going, okay, we're going to plan for this next move. We spent 5 years planning for it, you know, getting the rest of my family getting jobs that they could theoretically move or work remotely. The pandemic weirdly helped us out in that front, because then work from home became much more viable.
Yeah.
And so we just finally, once I got citizenship, that was kind of the last piece, because since I'm a freelancer, that was the harder sell, right? Because if my wife lost her job, then, you know, a huge chunk of our family is pretty much out. But if I have citizenship, then I can kind of anchor her down too and whatnot. So that put a lot of pieces in place. And so it became down to, because I had this citizenship route, I was able to move to the UK. So now we're here in London and have been since February.
How are you finding it? I mean, like you said 2016. We've had Brexit vote in 2016, and that was just a stupid decision. And we've had Johnson and Truss, and why?
We haven't had Trump though, so that's a good thing.
Right. And I mean, people have asked me, because like certain people have been like, you realize it's not that much better in the UK, and it's like, I recognize that there's a rise in conservatism, and a lot of things have happened, certainly. But to be perfectly blunt, I lived in Georgia. There is a very strong chance if I said, hey, Black people and trans people need some rights, I could be shot. That will not happen here as much. I'll make it knifed, granted, but you know, at least my healthcare is free. So, so I mean, it's a case of, to be blunt, not anywhere is good right now. It's kind of happening all over the place, but it's given the propensity of me and my family and how our politics align, there's a very real danger to us and to people we love. And so it's like, this is one way out, you know, this is one way for us to kind of get away from it. But I mean, on the other hand, I mean, the more upside of it is that my mom was born here, you know. I mean, the reason why I love Doctor Who, for example, is because I grew up in the 80s watching Doctor Who in the US, which is very, very hard to do. But because she was the kind of person who, like, you know, get tapes for me and books for me, because she loved it growing up, because, you know, she grew up, you know, around Dalek Mania and all that. So I mean, there's always been a desire to be here, because, like, you know, I have roots here on some level. And trust me, my spelling was atrocious for most of my childhood, because I read a lot of British literature and just couldn't get
lots of U's everywhere.
Yeah. And I finally get that all out of my head, and I moved here and just like, go back.
Yeah, I'm having to do that as well. I've got a client that wants everything in US spelling. Now, so it's the opposite for me. I mean, I've just got to use UK spelling. I'm like, oh, no. So I have to switch the spell checker to US spelling, to remove the UK dictionary. And yeah, it is an absolute headache. So I do sympathise absolutely.
Well, I mean, I've gone on rants about this, but Noah Webster fucked us real bad. I have strong opinions about a very dead man from 300 years ago, but he wrecked American English so bad.
Well, you got we might as well lean into the politics side of things since we're here already. But we've got Trump being indicted, and but despite he's being arrested again in Georgia, was it in Georgia that he was arrested?
Yeah. Weirdly, he's being arrested by the county I used to live in. So that's weird in the news lately. It's like
what I find amusing is like how he said like no surrender, no retreat. Then he surrenders himself to the county office.
Well, he's I was looking at some of the polls and stuff, and he's still pretty close for popularity and stuff. He's up there, and it's just like, and I'm not sure if that's. Sorry.
Honestly, no, I was going to say, like, polls have never been a reliable factor of presidential elections, but also certainly 2016 reinforced that to me, right? Like, because on paper, the polls were like Hillary Clinton was going to win by a landslide, right? It was like, don't even bother showing up, you're just going to lose, and clearly that didn't happen. I've been reading recently that the reliability of polls to election results for presidential races over the past, as long as they've been doing polls, which is close to like 70 or 80 years, is like 40% prediction rate. Because polling frequently is done by media groups, not in any kind of scientific way. So they're just trying to grab people, and so they're not doing due diligence. So they're going to get people in a cluster, and they're going to ask them all the same question, and those people are generally aligned. Like, for example, CNN is particularly bad about this because they're based in Atlanta. And so, like, if they talk to people in Atlanta proper, they're probably going to get a very Democrat-leaning response. And if they go outside of that, they're probably going to get a Republican-leaning response. So, I mean, it just depends on where they ask that question at.
And also, imagine if they obviously displaying themselves as CNN, a certain demographic of people will approach them more than another demographic of people.
Exactly. NPR polls are going to get a very different rate than, like, say, Fox News. So, I mean, it's all junk, right? I mean, when I was younger, I was very much in the all politicians are evil and whatnot. But certainly the past 10 years have proven, like, if you're hemorrhaging blood, you don't question too much what kind of cloth you staunch the wound with at a certain point, So it's like, okay, yeah, I could opt out and say I'm not going to vote because it's a rigged system, and it's like, okay, but that's not really helping anything. So I've had to, as a defense mechanism, had to learn more about politics, and of course now I'm having to learn it all again now that I moved, because I'm a citizen. I have the right to vote here.
Yeah.
Well, you get.
I was going to say I recommend listening to the Hard Talk BBC podcast. They're really good. It's Stephen Saka, and basically he grills politicians both left and right.
Okay, that's good. Actually, I appreciate that.
Yeah, you had the same similar, and in the same year as well, in 2006 with Brexit and stuff. Everybody thought that it was going to be fine. I even like thought, we're going to be fine. It's going to be all right. And then, that extra 2% kicked in, and we lost, and it was grim. And I guess it was our own fault because
complacency.
Yeah, and you underestimated your sort of the other side, and I think you had a lot of people like being a bit too outspoken, which meant that people who had the different views, who maybe they had different views, not maybe on the more extreme side of things of Brexiteers, but just because they had certain issues with Europe because of whatever reason, and they just didn't say anything. So if they got polled, they wouldn't say anything, or if they got talked about it, they wouldn't say anything. So they just got ignored, and so you had sort of this underlying mass of people who didn't want to say anything, least they be called a racist or something like that. And unfortunately, that's it came out, and then we've been gone down the shitters since. But it's one of those things. I think I learned a lesson from it, in that I was getting quite not irate, but I was getting into a lot of arguments with people about it. beforehand and getting very frustrated with them and maybe being a bit more abrasive and confrontational than I should be, than sort of maybe not listening to them and saying, look, I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand this, instead of just going, you're a fucking idiot, you're wrong, and then just sort of kind of, going, you're obviously wrong, you're a racist, and trying. So I was like, right, I did learn a lesson from it, but yeah, it's just.
And actually, going back to my job a little bit, that's actually something that I've been kind of struggling with on some level for the past 6 or 7 years as well, is that the counter narrative, right? In the sense of there has been this strong tendency of this one piece of media is dodgy. It's a little bit racist, a little bit homophobic, whatever. And so therefore the whole thing is invalid. And as someone who likes to occasionally write challenging media, that's been a tricky thing for me, because like you have to present people with horrible viewpoints in order to show the opposite, right? It's like you can't just say racism is bad, and then I have to show a meaningful viewpoint so that we can confront it, so we can combat it. I mean, to simplify it somewhat, I mean, like, if you're going to punch Nazis, those Nazis have to be a credible threat before you punch them.
Yeah.
If they're just cartoon Nazis, you might get a brief satisfaction out of it, but it doesn't actually engage with the topic. We ran into this actually a few years ago because I had pitched, I inherited 2 other people's pitches, and I synthesized them and turned it into a third pitch. So it was kind of a joint effort, but a cyberpunk game, because I'm a huge fan of cyberpunk, again, punk 80s. If I didn't read William Gibson as a computer nerd punk, I basically was doing it wrong. And so was like, I really want to do cyberpunk, but also I wanted to do more of the literary cyberpunk tradition. That was kind of my contribution to it. It's like, we could do Shadowrun Light or, Cyberpunk Red Light if we wanted to, but I think we could do something in a little more of a literary vein, where it's just focusing on the technology. And so the idea in 2019 we came up with first, Train to Continuum Anima, was you have an implant in your head that allows you to work from anywhere. Basically, you have a computer in your head. And so we talked about the ramifications of the fact that you don't have to go into an office, you can work from home. And this is a brand new city after a devastating war. And so I hired my team, and then 2020 happens and they started writing it. And it's just like, oh, now we're writing about working from home after it's scary to go outside because of a devastating problem. And I had to get my team through some mental frustration. That was a hard book to get through, right? Mm-hmm. And on top of all of that, one of the conceits was that the government setting up the city you're living in was ultimately a fascist government. But it was early stage fascism. It's the honeymoon period of fascism, where like, if we keep you here, you'll be safe and everything will be fine. And the writers, we had to talk about that. And it's like going, we'll put a thing up front saying, let's be super clear, this is fascism. And we support tearing down fascism. We're hoping your players want to tear down this fascist government. But we're going to have to present viewpoints from this fascist government's viewpoint to see why people would find that attractive, right? And so that was a lot of hard conversations and a lot of hard work to make sure we hit the right balance of, we didn't want it to be a paper tiger that you could just easily tear down. We had to show why this is an actual creeping long-term threat. And of course, again, we're talking about this, we're trying to dial it in. We have the manuscript more or less done. And we're talking about things like, what happens when the government tries to do a military coup? And then, of course, January 6, 2021 happens. And it's just like, okay, this is getting a little frustrating. Could the world please stop doing this when I'm trying to make this game?
Did you ever watch The Man in the High Castle on Amazon?
I should. I have not gotten around to it, but I've heard
that's really, because that's obviously displays a fascist government.
Yeah.
And how it does it, both how they maintain their competency and control, despite some horrific things they do.
I watched a couple of episodes of it, and for some reason it didn't I never went back
It's
to it.
slow burn.
Yeah.
It's a slow burn.
It's like, is it basically Germany and they
Won
won
the
the
Second World
war
War.
and they split up America, so you got the
Yes, but
Japanese in the West and
yeah.
okay.
But they do really well. Like this is how, you know, America is controlled by a fascist state, and it is horrific. I mean, one of the most chilling scenes was when you had classroom of primary school children doing doing the Hail Hitler to a picture of Adolf Hitler, and that was just absolutely chilling to watch.
Right.
Have you ever, on a random note, but sort of kind of slightly connected to it, have you ever seen a film, I think it's called Fatherland, with Rutger in it?
I think it does sound familiar.
It's basically
the same concept, right?
Yeah, so Germany won the war, and therefore the Holocaust was never found out about. So they basically hid the Holocaust,
right.
and it's all about him finding out about the Holocaust and because he works for the police, much as the Gestapo. He uncovers it, and it's all about him uncovering the Holocaust. It's a really, really good film. But it's just that story when we were talking about Germany winning the war that popped into my head, so I thought I'd share.
yeah. But I mean, like, there's on a wider level, though. I mean, like, there's this. I like lots of older media, like, you know. I mean, earlier I mentioned classic Doctor Who. There's some parts of that that's not aged well, you know. For example, I mean, you know, a lot of old British television. I'm watching Babylon 5 right now, you know, which is, you know, boy, if you want a show about election fraud and xenophobia and people in a populist movement uprising and trying to overthrow government, gee, that's fucking poignant. But you know, all these things have problems, and I've seen people unironically say, "Oh, well, there's this one thing in it, so I can't watch it because it's horrible." And I'm like, "Okay, if you can't watch it, that's fine. I'm not taking that away from you. And if you find it too uncomfortable, don't watch media that you don't want to watch. You know, that we have way too much of it. You know, this life's too short." But then say nobody should watch it. That's where I personally get a little frustrated, because I do believe that by erasing problematic media, we're just reiterating the problem. It's like we have to see these
It's an
things
echo
and we have to
chamber
engage
then.
with them.
Yeah, I have a thing that I do, and I learned this from I did a history degree, a military history degree. We were always told that there's always another side to the coin. So, and we were taught when we did things like, you have a viewpoint on something, but you should always understand what the other viewpoint is, even if you disagree with it, because you will have a more balanced view on history, and therefore make a more balanced output whenever you write your pieces. And I make a conscious effort. You'll see in my Facebook friends and stuff, I have people who I fundamentally disagree with on a lot of things, but I don't get rid of them, and I engage with them because I would rather be slightly uncomfortable with what they're saying, but understand what other people are saying about things, so I understand where that is, than just having an echo chamber that just agrees with everything I say, because that doesn't help the situation. Because those people, and you, like within Brexit and stuff, those people are still there, and it's just like I'm just hiding them. So I've got lots of people who they will get rid of people, or they'll get rid of books, or they won't read certain things, or they won't do certain things because it triggers them or whatever. And that's fine, that's up to them. But me personally, I like it's not like I feel like I need to do the uncomfortable thing, especially like history. I'm a massive history fan. I love my history, and I read a lot of books that are contrary to the stuff that I was brought up being taught. Like there's some books called Waterloo, the German Victory, and it's basically about how that most of the Allied forces in the army, the Allied army during Waterloo were German. You know, and the British were basically effectively a third, if you include the Prussians and stuff. There wasn't, it was a British general, obviously, but it was the Germans. So it's all about the Germans were the main part of the thing. So these things, like, when people don't want to understand these things, you get this a lot with nationalistic and very patriotic views, that they refuse to accept uncomfortable truths because it goes against the narrative of what they've been brought up with. And I personally think you should always read the uncomfortable stuff, and you don't have to agree with it, but at least you know it's there and you see the other viewpoint. So when somebody does start arguing about it, you can't go, yeah, well, you're a stupid head and I don't believe you. You can kind of go, yes, I understand that point, but, and then you can argue a counterpoint, and you can be a bit more rational and reasonable with your view, than just kind of being upset and kind of go, no, I don't like you, I don't, you're wrong. And it's just like, yeah, so that's my view, and I try to have that as my sort of thing. I will engage with people I disagree with. I will read books I don't fully agree with, or go against what I've been brought up with, just because I feel like it gives me a bit more balance in life.
Sure, but I mean, like, even like just for entertainment stuff, right? Like, it's the something can be brilliant and still problematic from a modern perspective. And I feel like if something has problematic elements from an art type of perspective, and let's assume it's unintentional, right? Like, it just is aged badly, not like it's intentionally provocative. There are lots of people who are like, okay, well, that should not be shown on TV, or that shouldn't be streamed, or whatever. And I find that frustrating. A good example, actually, there was a very early episode of Next Generation, like episode 4 of Next Generation, which was horribly racist, because the basic premise is there was a planet all full of black people that came in to try to steal the women of the Enterprise and turn them into their slaves. It's bad. There's just no way around it.
I'm trying to think of that episode now.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a good episode either. I mean,
okay.
It's not exactly. It was early in TNG. So
there was this.
Really
do you remember the Space Irish one?
Oh, I do. Yeah, there's lots of
The Space Irish.
And then Voyager's like, we should do that even more. I was like, no, stop, Voyager. But I mean, but like Jonathan Frakes recently has been saying things like, I wish they would never stream that episode. And it's like, I understand his instinct is like, I'm in that episode. Yeah. I don't want to be seen in that episode because I really don't like what that says. I get the instinct of there, but I really feel like that's the kind of thing you put a warning in front of it saying, these values are no longer ours.
Yeah.
So but you have to watch that to show, hey, this is how we've changed.
I recently watched some episodes of Airwolf.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, the
that's
80s
old
TV
school,
at the time. Again, the concept is brilliant.
Yeah.
Then you start watching it and you go, oh my God, the politics are horrendous. Like, it's really, I didn't realize at the time because I was, in sync or bigger than. But no, yeah, it's incredibly right-wing, nationalistic, and you're going to shoot Americans. They're the wrong Americans. And like, okay, I don't remember that as a kid. But yeah, but I still look back at it as fondly. It's like, yeah, that was a great show about a flying, super helicopter. And then you start, but then I put it now as an adult, I'm going, no.
So would you?
Yeah, and I said earlier, I'm a huge Transformers fan. I love Transformers.
Yeah.
Most people, unlike me, probably have not watched the original cartoon in a very long time and have forgotten that there are 2 episodes, not 1, but 2 episodes that feature the country of Carbamia, which is very obviously a Middle Eastern country and is as bad as it sounds. In fact, it was so bad that Casey Kasem quit the show over it because it was so offensive.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And it's like, why does this show about giant alien robots have horrible racist stereotypes? But you think of BGI Joe that would step at landmine. No, it's Transformers that did that. And it's like, wow. So, I mean, it's... Yeah. And so, like, I could still watch that cartoon and go, okay, cool, I'm just going to skip those episodes because, again, they're not very good to begin with, so I'm going to skip over them. But not like this whole cartoon should not be shown now. And then there's a reactionary component that, as an artist, I find sometimes a little disturbing. I'm not in the camp of nothing should be censored. Obviously, there are certain things that should absolutely be censored. There are certain things that just shouldn't be for public consumption. But that doesn't mean they should not exist. It just means that maybe they don't belong in just like you wouldn't put a snuff film on BBC, right? I mean, certain things like if you want to find it, you can find it. It's there if you really want to find it.
Age ratings are there for a reason.
Right, exactly. But that allows you to make a choice about what media you want to consume. Eradicating it, like, I mean, I feel like we should be aware to it. And so as an artist, if I want to do something that provokes people, I feel like I need to have that tool in the box. And again, like I feel like I'm a person that I'm on the one hand, I try very hard to be respectful and understanding and get multiple viewpoints in and work with a diversity of people. On the other hand, I recognize I'm a middle-aged white guy. I'm gonna screw it up. And so I don't want to be in a place where it's like, okay, I can't do anything controversial because I can't even get started, right? I can't. People won't engage in my work and say, okay, I can ignore this bit, or this bit's a bit rough, and maybe I could talk to Eddie and get them to update it in the new edition. It's nope, that this one paragraph is horrible, so the whole book needs to be shut down, taken off, drive to RPG, can't look at it. That's the reaction I admit I'm a little nervous about.
Yeah. Would you when it comes to, because there's been a lot recently where, for example, Community, they have taken out the episode where oh god, what's his name, the comedian?
The Spanish teacher, he
dressed
up a drow.
Yeah, he dressed up as a drow, so they've taken it out because it's effectively blackface and stuff. And what are your views? Is it one of those things that's just like, yeah, maybe it was a bit they didn't think about it properly?
That episode's an interesting choice because I actually watched it right before the controversy happens.
Yeah.
I thought it was hysterical because the whole point of the episode, if you actually watch it, is all of the people on the table going, no, don't do that, right?
Yeah.
The point is not that the show's going, hey, this is a great idea. The show's going, no, he's such an idiot. He doesn't recognize what he looks like. Everyone at the table being deeply uncomfortable with it. That's exactly the kind of thing that people should be watching. Like, This is why blackface is bad, and saying it's a drow is not an acceptable defense. That's what the whole episode's saying. To say we can't show that, it's like that's the exact opposite you want. You want people to watch the episode and go, okay, if you understand why drow is a problem, watch this episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Babylon 5 earlier.
Oh, of course, Pete.
I have to ask. I've literally just watched The Road Home, that animated film that just got released.
I haven't seen it yet. Is it good?
Really good. Okay. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Babylon 5. I watched it back in the 90s. I mean, I remember driving to university one day and like, I've got to get back. I've got to get there in time to watch the episode.
Nice.
And for me as a fan, it's kind of dotted a lot of I's, across a lot of T's, and it ends on such a brilliant line, which is like, Babylon 5 is back and is here to stay. Which, if you know the history of Babylon 5, and that apparently there's an executive in Warner that did not like it and recently left. And now they kind of they got the film out, and now they're kind of doing this massive reboot of the entire story with GMS coming back to it. The ending on that line was an absolute fist bumping moment. But I mean, as a fan, watch it. I mean, where are you up to in it?
What?
Where are you up to in Babylon 5?
So I'm in a weird place because I'm most of the way through season 1. But prior to that, I had been watching a fan edit of it because the fan edit it turned it into 22 movies, and the idea was it cuts out all the filler. And so I started watching it, and I was like, this is not as good as I remember it being. This is supposed to be like the pacier version of it. So why am I struggling with this? And I realized that at the expense of plot, I was cutting out all the character stuff. And like, for example, as a spoiler for a 30-year-old show that maybe 5 people watching this haven't seen yet, but like Garibaldi's alcoholism arc is completely gone, and I'm like, why would you do that?
That leads into massive plots in the later seasons.
I mean, it's referenced. Like, I'm not, like he'll occasionally make a reference to it because it kind of just seemed like they couldn't cut around it entirely. But generally speaking, like him falling off the wagon and then going back on the wagon, that whole subplot is gone. It's just he's a recovering alcoholic from day one. So like I realized I was like, I want to watch it from the start. So I'm like, I remember plot up to about roughly season 3, but I'm restarting at 1 because related, I just finished Deep Space Nine, just because I love Deep Space Nine. And one thing I noticed watching it again is that in the 90s, the frustrations about Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5 was that it's too serialized. And like you can't watch it in isolation like you can with D&D. And we just watch TV differently now. So I'm like, oh, this is probably aged really well. And I realized that now the opposite is true. Like so much TV is heavily serialized, both Babylon 5 early on and Deep Space Nine aren't. And so for a while I was struggling with Deep Space Nine specifically, and I realized that that's actually the point, because both of those shows, one thing they do brilliantly that TV before and after have never figured out is the episodic subplots are how you get to love the characters. If it's just the serialized plot, then you don't fall in love with Garibaldi. You don't fall in love with Ivanova. I mean, it's like if you're cutting off all of the non-plot stuff, you miss Ivanova's jokey fatalism slowly turning into actual fatalism. And there's this, it's a slow change that you need to just spend the time with, right?
Yeah.
So I'm now back watching the episode, although I'm watching a slightly different order, because I'm apparently there's a few episodes early on that were kind of shown out of production order, and there's minor spoilers. So I'm watching a rejiggered order to kind of get those little lined up. I'm curious to see how that plays out.
We are massive fans on this podcast and of The Expanse. Have you watched The Expanse?
I've watched like a season and a half of it. Funny story, actually. How I got into watching The Expanse was Thomas Jane, right? Because I was at a convention 2016, I want to say. I was invited to a convention in New York, and it was a gaming media convention, right? Yeah. And they said, there's a VIP, and I was like, okay, cool, great, no problem, go there, and go on someone else's dime to go do some panels, not a big deal. Done it before, and they're like, since you're a VIP, we're gonna have a special dinner for the VIPs. Like, oh, that's a nice thing, get together and VIPs. What I didn't know is that the media VIPs and the gaming VIPs were all on the same track. So Thomas Jane was there right after his Punisher movie. And I had the amazing experience, because we're on the same hotel and everything. So we had dinner together. He's a hilarious guy. And then he's like, I'm gonna go back to my room for a while. And okay, cool, whatever. We're do other stuff. I also met Denise Crosby, and she's fantastic. But then later on, we run into him in the hotel, walking in the halls, and he is baked, just out of his head. He's like, I really want ice cream. And I'm like, all right, let's see if we can find you some ice cream. And so we spent like 30 minutes wandering the hotel trying to get Thomas Jane ice cream. And so when I heard, he's like, he's got work again. It's on The Expanse. I have to watch this.
Did you not? You've only done a season and a half. Did it not grab you, or?
Honestly, it came down to I was like, something else popped up, and I was like, oh, I'll watch this later. And it's been a year, so at some point I will get back to it.
It's honestly, for me, it's possibly some of the best sci-fi that's been on TV in many years. Like,
is it on Prime here?
Yeah, it's on Prime.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I have learned moving to the UK is that everything is on a completely different service than I'm used to, and some things don't stream at all, and other things do. In the US,
that's regionalization.
Finding things a nightmare.
Yeah. But it's like the 6th season. They've cut it down, but it has the ending isn't sort of completely sort of a damp squib. It's sort of kind of explains enough for you to kind of go, okay, I'm okay with that. But it's so good. Like, the whole thing, I loved it. Like, they were banging on about it for years when it was going on that I should watch this, and it's like, nah, it was on Sci-Fi. I'm not interested in that B-rated crap. I'm not doing it. And then I think it was in lockdown, and I was like, it's on Prime now. I've got Prime. I'll give it a go. It was on season 5, I think, 4 at the time, I think, and I was just like, I'll give it a whirl. I watched one season. I watched 4 seasons in the space of about a week, I think, and I was just like, this is the best thing I have ever seen in my entire life, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. Just
honestly, one thing I have learned about me, I don't know why, but I don't have the binging gene.
Really?
Right?
Wow.
Like, I can get obsessed about a lot of things. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I just the Transformer stuff alone should make it super clear. I mean, I have entire all my tattoos are Sherlock Holmes themed. I mean, I've got
nice.
Yeah.
Good luck.
The 221B and
I
mean, so like I get obsession. But when I am obsessed with something, I don't just like sit down and back to back. What I do is like I over months, like I said, I watched 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine, but I did it over the course of 6 months.
Yeah.
So like I find that after reading like a book for a few hours or watching TV for a few hours, I just have to stop take a break. I'll may start the next day. But so sometimes it does mean like if I'm in the middle of watching a show like The Expanse, if something else takes my attention away, then I may just not get back to it for a while.
Yeah.
I usually go back and finish up.
Sounds very healthy to me. I will literally just watch something until I cannot. I will watch them until I'm about to fall asleep, and then I have to go watch that last episode. But I will do that the next day and carry on until it's over. And the same with good books. Like when Game of Thrones. So basically, when Game of Thrones came out, my sister's like, "Have you heard of these books, the Game of Thrones books?" And I was Song of Ice and Fire books, and I was like, vaguely, but I've not read them. She says, well, they're creating the series, and because in Northern Ireland they filmed some of it basically where my parents live and stuff, basically in and around, like a load of my friends were extras and stuff. But anyway, my sister was an extra. But you have she's like, this is happening, and I'm going to do an extra thing on it. And I was like, all right, I'll give the books a whirl. I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, but we'll see what these are all about. And it was just as Dance of Dragons came out, so the 5th book. And within 3 weeks, I had 1 week before I went on holiday and 2 weeks on holiday, and I read 4.5 books. The only reason I read 4.5 of them was because at the end of the 5th book, when Jon Snow, I was getting so fed up with people I like getting killed that as soon as Jon Snow got his neck cut at the end, I was just like, I'm done with this fucking series. I don't want to do it. And I did a Joey. I was like, I would put it, if I could have put it in the freezer, I would have. But it's like, I literally was like, I am done with this fucking book. And I put it down, and it took me 3 months to finish the last few chapters at the end to sort of kind of deal with it and stuff. I was like, I have to go back after the trauma of it all. I was like, right, fine. And then I've been waiting, it was 2012, 2013 that came out. So I've been working, nearly 10 years now for the next one to come out.
It's not coming out, Matt.
Accept defeat.
Yeah, just...
Anyway, we've been recording now for about nearly an hour and a half, and it's way past your bedtime.
I want to do one thing before we go, right? So first, is there anything, you've got this on your website, you got Realms of Pugmire. What's that all about?
That is actually my creator-owned world. So Realms of Pugmire, the short version is it's set far in the future of our world. Humanity's gone somewhere. Maybe they've died. Maybe they've gone into space, turned into alien brain clouds. Who knows? But they have left dogs and cats and other animals behind, uplifted. And the dogs and cats don't really know that it's not a fantasy world. So it's kind of Lord of the Rings meets Planet of the Apes, but with dogs.
Right.
Basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And we just kickstarted our 2nd edition back in January. So that was during a fun time to try to do an OGL-based game in January of this year. Let me tell you.
We'll not go into the OGL because we'll be on for another hour and a half.
It is no longer an OGL-based game. Let's put it that way. I've made enough decisions to distance myself from that. This is the 2nd edition of it. I mean, it's been around since 2015. I've also got like a Choose Your Own Adventure digital app novel out. I did an interactive audio drama with it. Some books of fiction, including the original anthology fiction. Actually has a number of old TSR alumni who got to work on it. And we did there's a companion game in the 1st edition for cats. That's all being kind of folded into the new edition of the game. So yeah, if you think a dog swinging a battle axe is cool, or if you're just into fantasy games that are pretending to be science fiction games, or vice versa, go check out realmsofpugmire.com.
Awesome. Okay, so one last thing before we go. So we do this whatever. We have a bit of a sort of 20 questions pop quiz. You choose we'll all choose a franchise, and then the others have to guess a character that we have in our mind for that franchise. And because you're into your Transformers, I feel like I need to do Transformers for you and stuff. So what I'm going to do is Transformers. I'm going to think of a character. You've got 60 seconds to ask me questions to figure out who that character is. Okay. Yeah. So, I'll get my little stopwatch on. This might be well easy for you because I get the impression you're like a super Transformers nerd, so it's probably not going to last.
We'll see how it
goes. So, for 1 minute. Stopwatch. Right. Okay. So it's literally, I'll just say Transformers 60 seconds, and then you can ask me questions, and then I'll say yes or no or whatever, and then at the end of the 60 seconds you can ask one more question, and then you have to guess. So Transformers 60 seconds, go.
Are you an Autobot?
I am not an Autobot.
Are you
were you with the original cartoon?
I am in the original cartoon. I am a Decepticon.
Okay.
Can you fly?
Die in the movie?
So he is in the movie.
Okay.
Can you fly?
Most of them can fly in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Are you a plane?
I am not a plane.
Okay. Are you purple?
I am purple.
Do you have one eye?
Yes.
Are you Shockwave?
I am Shockwave. 36 seconds. Oh, no. Oh, very good. Yes, you are. That was very good. That was straight to it. I was like, there's so many of them. It's going to be, oh, well, there we go. I was kind of going, did I go to one of the wikis? I don't know if I kind of go for one of the, Dan or, what was the little boy? What was the little boy called? There was
Spike. No, the Spike.
No, there was Spike, and then Daniel. Daniel was the little boy. Yeah. Sorry, that's what I've done. Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, to be fair, I had just finished up watching the some of the Japanese exclusive TV shows that came up after the original series ended. So you get the fun stuff like Blaster dies and it comes back as a different colored Blaster, but he's a completely different character. He's blue now, and so he's Blastoid, I think.
Blastoid, right?
Like yeah. So it's it's just nonsense. Or the guy who looks exactly like Optimus Prime, but is actually a Japanese truck driver. I mean, it's
I was gonna go for Metroplex at one point. I was like, I go for as soon as you went on, you were talking about Transformers. I cannot wait to the end. I'm like, I'm either gonna go for Metroplex, or I'm gonna go for Shockwave, or maybe one of the sort of kind of Slag or something from the Dinobots.
Yeah.
Pete, what have you got first?
Red Dwarf. Because you did that role-playing game, so I thought,
sure.
Let's test your knowledge. Red Dwarf.
Okay, Red Dwarf, 60 seconds, go. They wanted the crew.
No.
Are they an alien?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Are they dead? Are they dead?
Are they dead?
Are they dead?
Okay. No, not dead.
Are they a hologram?
No.
Are they a recurring character?
Yes.
Are they are they feline genetics?
Yeah, they do have feline genetics.
Is it cats?
Not cats.
No, it's not in the crew. Are you from a parallel universe?
Yes.
Are you dog?
No.
Are you Dwayne Dibley? Are you Dwayne Dibley?
Yes, you are.
I'm Dwayne Dibley. Dwayne Dibley.
Yeah. Hence why I said technically alien.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
right. Dwayne Dibley. Okay. Still technically part of the crew. Technically,
no, it's not.
Because Dwayne Dibley gets when they suck out what's the that sucks out their personality and stuff. He's still cat. He's just taken out his cool, so he is still. But then
he appears later as well.
I know,
so
but
do I get to do one for you guys too? Now,
yeah, you have to do one for us. Please don't make it too obscure.
I'll just do Babylon 5 actually.
I know nothing about Babylon 5, so this will be all Pete. Okay, so Babylon 5, 60 seconds, go.
Are you human?
Yes.
Are you Air Force?
No.
Okay, are you a telepath?
No.
Okay. Ooh. Are you part of the station crew?
No.
Okay, are you on Babylon 5?
Sometimes.
Okay. Are you in the first season?
Yes.
Do you fly a ship?
No.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Are you a recurring character?
Yes, I'm a recurring character.
Are you one of the casts, as in the primary cast of the series?
No.
Okay.
I do not. I'm not in the initial title sequence.
Okay. Yeah. Are you male?
Yes.
So male, not Earth Force. Okay.
60 seconds is up. One more question, and you have to guess.
Okay. Are you Senator Hidoshi?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, Pete.
Are you a politician?
No.
No more questions. That's it. You got to guess now.
Wow. Okay. So I know. I have no idea.
Morden.
You call yourself a Babylon 5 fan, Pete. Take those
He's a
Babylon.
recurring character. He's not a politician. He's not part of the crew. He's not Earth Force.
Yeah.
He is human.
Just get out of town, Pete.
I'm going to have to hand in my...
Yeah, you might as well just... You're not allowed to talk about it ever again because you obviously aren't a fan, you know? You just got schooled, bro.
Absolutely. Very well played.
Awesome. Well, that's been very enjoyable. Thank you very much for your time, Eddie. It's really appreciated. Good luck with everything. Good luck with Realms of Pugmire. And if you have anything else that you want to share with us in the future, please do come back and let us know. We'll have more of a chat. So for tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Ellison.
Good night, everyone.
And our special guest, Eddy Webb.
Bye.
Bye.